Hello, it's Dawn Michelle from Boho Tarot, and welcome to my monthly reflections video where we chat about the decks and other things I got up to throughout the month. So today we're going to be talking about the decks that I worked with throughout the month of October. Now I'm going to skip my usual, kind of introduction, all of that kind of good stuff. We're not going to talk about books or YouTube or anything else because I'm going to be perfectly honest, I've not been well the last couple of weeks for sure, but really the last 2 months. So today I'm just going to forego all of that and we're just going to jump right into what you really want to see anyways, I'm sure, which is the decks that I worked with throughout the month of October. And as you can see by the pile I have here, there were quite a few of them. Now, October is always the month that I get into all my sort of darker, spookier, kind of Halloween, Samhain inspired decks, and that is definitely something that I did this month. I actually put a lot of these decks away throughout the year, and I only bring them out during the month of October, or sometimes October, November, and it does kind of make them feel a little bit special in that sense. The Zombie Tarot and the Madame Lydia's, which we'll be taking a look at here in a minute, really fall into that category. These are decks that I've had for a while, and I really only use them in October. The Madame Lydia's I sometimes use into November as well, but that does make them feel kind of special to me because I really look forward to using them. I look forward to October hitting so that I can jump into these decks. I really enjoy my work with them, and then I put them away and I save them for the next special time that they're going to come out. So for me, that's kind of not only a way for me to rotate my decks around so that I'm making sure that I'm making use of my kind of full collection, but it also does kind of make some of the decks that I work with feel a bit more special because they are really attuned to a certain type of energy or work for me. So without further ado, let's jump into all the decks I worked with. So the two main decks that I worked with throughout the month, and you'll see in the next video when we talk about my tarot journal, how I actually worked with certain decks for certain practices throughout the month of October. So for my weekly readings, or what I usually call my Monday messages, I was working with the Le Vampire's Oracle and the Madame Lydia's, I always forget, Madame Lydia Wilhelmina's Tarot of Monsters, the Macabre, and Autumn Scenes. Now this deck, as I know, is currently out of print, and I do believe that the creator, while they had intentions of doing some reprints, have been having some health issues and have not been able to do that. There is a website for this deck, and I encourage you to go check it out. I think there's a mailing list. Go ahead and get on that if you're interested in this deck, and then that way you will be able to hopefully be notified if and when this deck becomes available again, because it is harder to get a hold of. It also comes with the Dreary Squirrel card, which I love. This is the title card, which I do keep in this deck. I don't usually do that, but for this particular one, I do have it in here. I don't remember what kind of a box it came in. I've made a bag for it, as I often do with many of my decks. And this deck I also ended up edging this month. In October, I ended up edging quite a few of my decks that I hadn't gotten around to edging yet. I did actually write down the inks that I used, or the markers that I used for these. So for the Madame Lydia's deck, I used the Tombow 991, and I'll leave that in the description box below for you in case you are interested in doing this exact same color on your deck. I wanted something that matched that kind of gold yellowy tone on the back of the cards in that delicate scroll work, and I think it ended up turning out pretty well. So I worked with that one, edged that one, and I was pairing it with the Lucy Cavendish Vampire Oracle, which I will be perfectly honest, has totally surprised me. I was not kind of expecting to like this deck as much as I do. I'll talk about that more in a moment. This is, again, another deck that I edged, so you can see it here. This one I edged in the Artist Loft 109 in dark umber. So it's basically a really, really dark brown. And I wanted to do that to kind of mimic the dark brown colors in the border. I thought about black, but I decided just to go with the really, really dark brown to kind of give it a little bit more of that antique-y aged look. versus so much of the just straight black. I have a lot of decks edged in black, so when I get the opportunity to use a different color and I feel like it's going to work, I do like to do that. So as per my usual kind of weekly readings these days, I have my Oracle deck in the center for my focal point and my 2 tarot cards on either side of it to expand upon that message. I really enjoyed the way these 2 decks work together. I think that aesthetically speaking, they do pair quite well together, even though we have very different art styles here, right? We have this photo collage Renaissance kind of photo manipulated art going on in the Madame Lydia's, which I think this deck is one of, I think, the best examples of kind of photo collaging, taking old artwork and making it into something new. I think this deck is one of the best examples of that because it's done so beautifully well. And then you can see in the Vampire Oracle, we have that kind of the big doll, big-eyed artwork of Jasmine Beckett Griffith, which I didn't know if that was going to actually work together because, again, they're 2 very different art styles. But I think because they both have a little bit of that sort of medieval feel to them, they actually, I think, aesthetically work quite well together. More importantly, they read really well together. So I was using the Vampire Oracle as my central focal point. So this is what I need to be focusing on this week. And then I used my tarot to expand upon that message. So here we have free will with sovereignty, independence, and free spirit between the Queen of Wands and the Devil. So that's really interesting when we're looking at, you know, how can we tap into the idea of free will? How can we assert our independence? Maybe we need to tap into that Queen of Wands energy, and we need to be aware of those times when that Devil energy is coming to the forefront for us. And so I think these decks actually read really, really well together. I also quite enjoyed the messages in the little guidebook, and I'll show you that here in a moment for the Vampire Oracle. I do not use any sort of a guidebook for the Madame Lydia's. There is a full, big, beautiful guidebook available on Amazon that you can pick up. That one's still available, but I tend to just read it using my own, you know, kind of tarot knowledge, my own interpretations. But for the Oracle deck, I definitely did dive into the actual guidebook for it, and I think that it really did help me to kind of dive deeper into the message as well. Kind of just get a takeaway was really what I was looking for in terms of the guidebook. But I think that these decks read beautifully together. Here we have Prey with stalked, invaded, and watched between the Ten of Swords and the Magician. And it's interesting how the Magician is like kind of facing this card, right? And this card is facing the Ten of Swords. So everything's looking back at the Ten of Swords there. That's, I think, a really interesting kind of combination, and we can look at maybe what that would tell us about everything is looking towards this ending here in this Ten of Swords. So I really, really enjoyed these 2 decks together, even though sometimes there's a few of the cards like this one that has a definite more modern look to it than, say, the Madame Lydia's Tarot. But then you get ones like these, and I mean, look how beautiful these look together. And I love when we can pick up, you know, color play, and we have things going on that are, you know, similar. This little unicorn horn has a kind of similar look and similar structure to the wands in both of these cards. That's really interesting. That might be something that I pick up on. So as I've mentioned, Madame Lydia's Tarot is one of my favorites. It's kind of one that I really do hold off just to use this time of year. It does have some dark, kind of creepy things going on it. I mean, look at this Fool with this jack-o'-lantern head. There's lots of skulls, lots of kind of creepy dark elements, lots of shadowy things going on in this deck that I really enjoy during this time of the year. Lots of kind of creepy things going on in the faces as well if you really pay attention to the details, and I really enjoy using this deck during this time of year. And again, I think this is a example of a wonderfully done, beautifully produced photo collage deck, because we have this old Renaissance style artwork, but we have elements that have been added to it, things that have been changed, and it is just flawless. Everything blends together so beautifully that it almost looks like it was an original work of art, which I think is just absolutely beautiful. So yeah, definitely one of my favorites. Check out that Temperance card. I mean, that is a creepy, creepy card, but I love it. I think it works so beautifully with this deck. And again, I think this deck just for the, for October, for the darker months of the year, just really does work beautifully. I so enjoy working with this one. And as I mentioned, I look forward to it. I specifically put it away so that I can get it out during this time of the year because it just makes it even more special for me. And I so enjoy working with it. I love this Nine of Cups. I think that's so fantastic. Let's talk a little bit more about the Vampire Oracle here. Again, wasn't really sure that this was going to be a deck for me. I wanted to give one of the decks by Jasmine Beckett Griffith, her art, a try. I didn't have any previously, so I watched a ton of videos and walkthroughs on all of the decks that she currently has available, or I should say all of the decks currently available with her artwork. And this was the one that I landed on. It just happened to be that it was a vampire one that worked for this time of year as well. I love this card. This card for me is total Hecate energy, which is fantastic. But it really was just out of all of them that I saw, this was the one that appealed to me the most. However, when I first got it, I was like, oh, I don't know if I can do it. It's too much like the Bratz dolls. I don't know if anybody remembers those. They show my age, but I'm going to say thankfully, because I think the Bratz dolls are creepy. Thankfully, my kids were never into Bratz dolls. My youngest was never into like baby dolls or anything like that. It was all about animal stuff, little pet shops and whatnot. So we never did the Bratz thing, but every time I saw these decks, I'm like, ooh, they're Bratz dolls. And I don't think I can do that. However, I have been really pleasantly surprised by the way that this deck works for me, the way that it reads. I really don't find the artwork or the big-eyed, big doll head thing to be as off-putting as I really thought it was going to be perfectly honest. I definitely prefer the cards that have kind of more of the full figure in them, where we see the kind of the whole person versus these really close up big face ones. These really aren't my favorite, but the messages on them are pretty great. There's a couple cards in here that I'm like, that's really bordering on the cheesy for me, but overall it reads really well, and I'm really pleasantly surprised by how much I actually enjoyed working with it. It's definitely one that I'm going to be keeping. It's definitely one that I will be using again. It will probably go into my pile of decks for October. I don't see it really being one that I might use year round. I feel like it's definitely one that's going to be just more towards the darker months of the year, but I did really enjoy working with it. Real quick before we move on, I do just want to talk real quick about this little guidebook. I have had other Lucy Cavendish decks and I never really got along with them. I think part of it was the decks that I had, I didn't really care for the artwork, and that kind of put me off the deck, so I never really gave the guidebooks much of a chance. I just want to show you real quick. One of the things that I really love about this deck is we have a little message from the vampire on the card, which is always clever. I love when guidebook authors do that. So it's like the card is speaking to you. You're having a conversation with it. The other thing that I really like about this guidebook is that it had a blessing and a curse. And so if you're looking at a card and you're looking at whether it's showing up in a positive or a negative position, or maybe a benefit or a challenge, you could use the blessing and the curse messages to correspond with those, which I thought was really, really quite interesting. I think it makes the deck more approachable and gives us more opportunity to use it in different ways. And then we also have a little bit about working with the card. And I really enjoyed the setup of this particular guidebook, and the messages were wonderful. And I read every entry for every card that came up for me. And I also pulled bits and pieces of the messages out and put them into my journal for my weekly readings. Like that's how big of an impression they made on me. I actually used them and incorporated them into my work. And for me, when I find that I'm incorporating elements from a guidebook into my tarot readings and into my tarot journal, then to me that says, yep, that's a good guidebook. I enjoyed it. So I just wanted to make a quick mention of that. So these were two decks that I definitely enjoyed my weekly readings with. I will definitely be using both of them again. That is the Le Vampires by Lucy Cavendish with artwork by Jasmine Beckett Griffith, and Madame Lydia Wilhelmina's Tarot of the Monsters, Macabre, and Autumn Scenes. So 2 other decks that I used kind of just for general readings throughout the month is the Barbara Walker Tarot, and this is the Witch's Oracle. This is the original box. I, of course, have made a bag for it, and the reason I've hung on to this was specifically so I could show you what the cards look like before, because I have actually trimmed this deck. So they had this white border on them before, and you'll see that I actually trimmed the deck, so I just wanted to show you that first off. So let's just go ahead and do that. This is the Witch's Oracle. Here's the backs. They are glossy. It's a beautiful deck, but as you can see, I trimmed that white border off, and I think it just made all the difference in the world. This one I did just edge in Tombow black. I have found that the Tombow blacks always transfer off on my hand. I've not been having that trouble with any other color, but the black has been giving me issues. So I've been trying to kind of work my way through that to try to figure out some things that I can do to kind of help that. But I've really been enjoying this deck. It's not one that was like really on my list to get. And I don't know if you can see if there's already black on my hands. That's how much it's transferring. So I need to fix that. But I saw, oh my goodness, I can't remember whose channel it was now. I'll see if I can find it and see if I can link it in the description box below for you. But I saw somebody paired this deck with the Barbara Walker Tarot. That's where I got it from. I'm gonna have to look up again and find out whose video it was that I was watching. But I had purchased the Barbara Walker Tarot. This is a little tin version. I don't think the full-size version is available anymore. I have seen it on eBay, and it's like $100 or more, and I just won't pay that for it because the little tin version is fine for me. Here's the backs. I wish the copyright wasn't on the front, but you know how that goes. I do wish the artwork was a little bit bigger. That's the only thing about the tin version, but I think you can see it well enough because it's not super detailed artwork. You can see it's fairly clear, and I do believe that this deck does follow more of a Thoth system, which is fine for me because that's a system that I'm currently working on learning. So you can see here like 3 of Swords is sorrow. Here we have Justice at position 8. 5 of Pentacles, hardship. So it does have keywords on the top, and usually I'm like, nope, on the keywords on the top, but I'm coming around to that, particularly after learning, going through and working with learning the Thoth. I have not finished my studies at all. I still have a long way to go, but there are some cards in here that I really like. I love this 9 of Swords with the cruelty. This Princess of Pentacles is wonderful. The quartz, I believe, are all like mythological people. Here we have 3 of Pentacles with work. Sometimes see like here's Queen of Wands with hell. 5 of Cups with regret. Sometimes I do find the keywords to be a little bit limiting, and I have to kind of work my way around that, like 2 of Cups for romance. Well, if this comes up in a work reading, right, romance isn't really gonna relate. So I have had to work my way around that a little bit, but it has been interesting to work with this deck and actually use the keywords as the deck is intended. The 6 of Cups with childhood is just like everything. That is a powerful card. And so I've really enjoyed working with it. However, this is not a nice deck. And what I mean by that is this deck has been kicking my butt all month long. It's not sugary sweet. It definitely doesn't pull its punches. It is definitely this is what you need to know, and I don't really care if you're not ready for it or you don't want to hear it or whatever your issue is. Like, set your issue aside and here's your crap to deal with. And sometimes I need a butt-kicking deck, and I love that this deck does that. I love this 9 of Pentacles though. That's just awesome. I do kind of wish I had the larger version just for the artwork, and it may be something that I eventually come around to getting. There is actually a guidebook, a larger guidebook. I have found it on Kindle. It does seem to be out of print for the print edition. I have seen it again on eBay and it's like $50 or more. I haven't decided if I'm like that invested in the Barbara Walker Tarot yet to spring for the bigger edition, and so basically the out of print deck and book. But it's definitely something that I'm thinking about because I've actually really enjoyed working with this deck. It surprised me, and I love its bluntness, to be perfectly honest. Sometimes I need a really blunt deck. So I've got more to say about the Barbara Walker Tarot because I had it for a couple weeks before I got to the Witch's Oracle. I'll just give them a little shuffle since we looked through it. And I just kind of started doing this pairing with these two quite recently. So I haven't had a chance to work with the Witch's Oracle much, but these decks together are stunning. So I think the thing about these two decks is the Barbara Walker Tarot does have a little bit of a witchy vibe to it. So it does, you know, it's definitely in the kind of realm of mythology. And so it works well with the Witch's Oracle. But something about these two art styles are super compatible. They did look quite nice with the white borders on them as well, because we have white borders here on the Barbara Walker Tarot. But you know me, I love to go borderless whenever I can. So that was definitely something that I knew I wanted to do as soon as I got this deck. In fact, like I didn't even hold off, like I didn't do a mod with me or anything. Like as soon as I got it, like that day I was trimming it. And it was a lot of fun. But I love the way these decks work together. The art styles are very compatible, and we have just a really wonderful message. And I find that the Witch's Oracle does soften the blow a little bit from the Barbara Walker Tarot. So it does kind of take the edge off a little bit, which sometimes is kind of nice. So here we have Owl with Wisdom Keeper, with the Princess of Cups and the World. Now, the Witch's Oracle does come with a nice guidebook, and I did use it because some of these terms, I wouldn't say that I'm not familiar with them, but I like to see what their perspective is on it, the guidebook's author perspective is. Look at this Queen of Swords with Kali. She's eating the insides. I mean, that's just awesome. With Serpent and Power. I mean, yeah. So here we have the Moon with timing between the Four of Pentacles and the Wheel of Fortune. Beautiful. There's just something really special about the way that these decks work together. And of course, they're both mass markets. They're both very readily available and easy to get a hold of and not expensive. And I found that actually, I think they work really well for this time of year because the Barbara Walker Tarot, I think, kind of dives a little bit into the shadow, and I think that works really beautifully during this kind of the darker months of the year, at least here in the side of the world that I'm on. So here we have Wand with Intention between Merlin for the Prince of Pentacles and the Hanged Man. I mean, beautiful. Look at how well those go together. Again, aesthetically, they're beautiful, but the way they read actually works really well. The Witch's Oracle kind of pulls a little bit of the sort of magic mystical out of the Barbara Walker Tarot. It also helps to kind of soften it a little bit. And the messages are just amazing. I mean, look at this. We have Bat with Rebirth and Consciousness between Judgment and Death. I mean, how beautiful is that? So yeah, I really enjoyed this pairing. It's not one that I got to do a ton of work with because I didn't have the Witch's Oracle at the beginning of the month where I had the Barbara Walker. So this I kind of integrated about halfway through the month, but I've really enjoyed working with it. It's definitely something that I'm planning on continuing to work with. Look at this, the Cauldron with the Womb between the Five of Wands and the Five of Swords. So we have impasse and defeat as our keywords between the Cauldron and the Womb. Interesting, right? Interesting. Yeah, I really enjoy this. This is definitely a pairing that I'm going to continue to work with. It's definitely something that I have been really getting a lot out of. There's a lot of really great, wonderful things that have been kind of brought to the surface for me in working with these decks. I've been able to dive a lot deeper into my readings with them, and it's given me something a little bit different to chew on, right? Because the Barbara Walker Tarot follows a little bit more of a different system than I normally use, and so it's encouraging me to look at the cards in a different way. It's encouraging me to look at my readings in a different way, and I really do appreciate that about it. I think sometimes it's really great to shake things up and to use a deck that makes you kind of stretch your tarot muscles a little bit, makes you kind of work at it a little bit. Sometimes that's good. It shakes things up, it gets us out of our kind of comfort zone, and it also kind of breaks our routine and allows us to kind of look at things from a little bit different perspective, which I really appreciate. So again, that is the Witch's Oracle by Sally Morningstar and the Barbara Walker Tarot. So another couple decks that I worked with for a very specific purpose or practice during the month was the Darkwood Tarot, which is currently now in this bag, which I have made for it, and the Seasons of the Witch Samhain Oracle. Now these two decks I used for the Lifting the Veil prompts that we did on my Facebook group. And it was fun to work with these two decks throughout the month. I did end up edging my Darkwood, so let's talk about that real quick. So the Darkwood was an interesting edging. I didn't want to do black. I just didn't. I originally wanted to pull in some dark brown to kind of offset this black color here, and you'll see that dark brown does actually feature pretty predominantly in the deck. So I started with the Artist Loft 109 in dark umber, and I went, well, that didn't quite fill it in as much as I wanted to, and now I want to add some green. So I added a layer of Tombow 098. And I kind of wish I would have just done that one from the get-go. And it added a hint of green, which probably will not even show up on camera because it is very, very subtle. And then to make matters worse, I added the Distressed Ink in Walnut Stain over the top in just kind of trying to darken particular areas of it. And what ended up happening was that the Distressed Ink ended up just kind of saturating the card a little bit more than I thought it was going to. And it made the overall color a lot darker than I really, really wanted. At least in person, I can see hints of green, I can see hints of lighter brown, and I can see hints of darker brown, which is quite cool, but it doesn't stand out quite as much as I really, really wanted it to. So this deck and me, we've had some challenges, but anyway, I mean, I do think it looks really, really nice, and it looks better edged. We don't have those white edges on there because this is a very dark deck. So before we do the pairing, let's talk real quick about this deck, because I did the full like walkthrough of it, right? And I mentioned that this is a deck that I had before. I looked through it and went, nope, not for me, and moved it along. And it came back around again, and so I did my actual proper walkthrough, read the guidebook, did all of that, and I was using it for the majority of the Lifting the Veil prompts on Facebook. And so you'll see that in the next video and in my tarot journal, and you'll see how that all kind of came together. And I enjoyed it, but I'm gonna be perfectly honest. I'm really not sure that this is a deck for me. It reminds me of my younger 20-something self. Like my younger 20-something self would have like died for this deck. Like it would have been everything. It would have been the only deck I'd ever use, right? It had been my favorite. And I love the animal cards. I love the animal cards. If there were no people in this deck, this would be the perfect deck for me. Again, this is all just my own personal thoughts and reflections on the deck and how it worked for me in my personal practice. I know that there are a lot of people that absolutely love and adore this deck, and it works beautifully for them. I will say this deck did surprise me in that there is a lot more depth going on here. When you get into the readings, when you get into the guidebook, then I think we really see at first glance, like the Seven of Wands here with this big kind of scary shadowy thing hanging over is really cool. And when you really start looking into the details in the artwork, there is a lot of depth there. And there's a lot of really, really smart choices in this deck. Some people in the walkthrough pointed out what was going on with the rabbit and the Four of Cups and the Five of Cups. So thank you very much. That was super helpful. And I did really enjoy my work with this deck, but I'll be honest, I think towards the last week of the challenge, after working with it pretty heavily for 3 weeks straight, I was kind of done with it. Like, I even switched decks for the last week of the challenge because I don't know, I just didn't really want to look at it anymore. I know that sounds terrible, and I don't really mean that in a bad way, but I think the problem for me, and I'm just going to be perfectly honest, is that my youngest is in this age bracket. And my youngest and their friends are all in this gothy, punky kind of, let's say, stage right now. And when I look at this deck, I think of them, right? And it's like, I think that if I were to pass this deck along to one of Ash's friends, who do all read tarot, so that's kind of cool. I think that they would click with this deck and it would be a match made in heaven. And I think for me, that's my personal hang up with this deck, is that I look at this deck and I go, oh, this would be great for Ash and their friends, but it doesn't connect for me. I can appreciate what's going on in the artwork. I can appreciate the beautiful symbolism that is in each of these cards. I think it's very smartly done in a lot of ways. There are some things that bug me about it. I mean, like every tarot deck, there's no such thing as a perfect tarot, right? If you want a perfect tarot, you got to make it yourself. And mine is a long way from being finished, and it's not even perfect. So, while there's a lot of things in this deck that I really, really like, there's that Five of Cups that I was talking about. Like this Eight of Cups with this snake. I mean, again, if we just had animals, if this creator did an animal deck, I would be all on board for it, because I think that the animals are fantastic. Like all of these cards, beautiful, beautiful. But then we get to the people cards and I'm like, it just doesn't connect for me. This Six of Wands is awesome. I love the fact that these people look like, we see the Six of Wands, we've maybe won a bit of a victory, but they all look a little bit, like kind of still disenchanted, because we're at the six, we're not at the end of the suit, and there's a lot more to go. I think I mentioned that in the walkthrough too, but yeah, so as much as I really appreciate what is going on in this deck, I think for me, the association that when I look at this deck and it makes me think of all the young people in my life, I have a hard time personally connecting with it in that way, because it makes me think of all of them. So I think that's just my own little personal thing. Again, I love the animal cards. Oh, I wish this creator would do a deck. This author and this artist do an animal deck. That'd be awesome. Let's leave the people out, because the people don't really throw me. And they're all very, very young and thin and beautiful, which is not my world. I'll just tell you, that's not me. So anyway, as far as working with the deck, it worked beautifully, and I did really enjoy a lot of the work that I did with it. I really enjoy what's going on in the cards. It's just, for me, I can't make that personal connection, because every time I see it, I go, oh, look, it's all the young people in my life. So the Samhain Oracle, I've talked about this one many times. This is a case where it's interesting, because these are all, for the most part, young, thin, beautiful. And I don't have the same connection with that, because I think for this deck, I can see more of my own personal practice in this deck. And so I don't know why there are reversals. I don't use reversals, especially not with Oracle, but I can see more of my practice represented in this deck, and so it works for me, even though like it has kind of the same thing going on as the Darkwood Tarot. So as far as being decks that just work together beautifully, the Samhain Oracle and the Darkwood they're stunning together. They have similar art styles, which I think mesh really well together. So here we have protection between the Four of Pentacles and the Chariot. I do love the messages on the bottom of the Samhain Oracle. I think they are quite beautiful, and I do enjoy the guidebook as well. I do dip into that quite often. But you can see here those similar art styles are really compatible. They have a very compatible energy, and they do converse really well together. And I do think that they work really well in terms of kind of drawing out deeper messages from each other. The Darkwood Tarot definitely does, you know, it bills itself as a shadow deck, and it definitely does lean more into the shadow. And I found that pairing it with the Samhain Oracle did help kind of balance that back out. If you're not necessarily looking to do shadow work or shadow readings, you don't always want a deck that is you know, just leans into the shadow and kind of ignores the other side of it. I don't really look for decks to be one or the other, because I think that life is not one or the other, and it's everything all mixed in together. And I can end up getting a shadow reading with like an angel tarot. I think the type of deck doesn't necessarily matter. Some decks are better attuned to that, I guess, than others, but I find that I don't need a deck to draw that out, is what I'm trying to get at. But when you have a deck like this that has been designed to kind of hone in on that energy, adding an oracle that kind of balances it back out, I think really helps. So here we have the Coming of Winter with the Queen of Swords and the Eight of Swords. That's kind of beautiful. The Samhain Oracle is always a deck that I enjoy. I use this deck pretty consistently for my dark moon reading practice as well. I find it works beautifully for that. So again, that was the Darkwood Tarot paired with the Seasons of the Witch Samhain Oracle. And finally, let's talk about one last deck that I used on and off throughout the month of October, which is one of my favorite decks to use in October, and it is the Zombie Tarot. I even still have the guidebook in here. I did make a bag for it. The box is super cool, but I found it to be a little bit clunky and actually trying to store and deal with on a daily basis throughout the month, so I made a bag for it. But I did keep the little guidebook because the messages in here make me giggle and I enjoy it. So I do have that in there. This is another deck that I finally got around to edging. It's taken me forever to edge this deck. I ended up edging this one in Tombow 977. Again, this is another example of where I was like, I could just edge it in black because the backs are black, right? But the deck has a really vintage look to it, a very vintage feel. And so I wanted to pull that in instead rather than just going with black again, because as I've mentioned, I have a million decks edged in black. And I thought doing it in this vintage look would be, this kind of vintagey brown would be fun. And I actually really love the look of it. It makes it look even more vintage, which is fantastic. So let's just talk real quick about this deck. I adore this deck. This deck is another one that often surprises me because I'm always like, oh, it's funny. Like it's just a funny little deck. It's like a novelty deck, but it's really not. I find this deck is actually a really fantastic reader. It has some really smart, interesting cards in it. Look at this High Priestess. I love her. There's some fantastic symbology in this deck. This 10 of Cups, the happy family on the beach, and the world is crumbling and burning to the ground around them. I mean, I love that. There's a lot of really smart things going on in this deck. It's one that I really enjoy working with. This Empress is awesome. We have the, the little 50s mom here and the child who is undead, and really just speaks to that energy of even when your children are little monsters, you love them anyway. That is definitely something I can relate to. It's just, yeah, it's a really smart deck. It's very funny. I find it to be, have a really humorous energy to it, but it does read really solidly as well. This to me is the epitome of self-care, which is fantastic. This chariot with all the zombies around, and they've got this like Walking Dead thing going on their car. It's just cool. Anyway, yeah, I really enjoy this deck. Again, this is another one that I only really use in October, and it does feel very special to me because it's kind of the only time that I use it. That is the Zombie Tarot, again, another mass market deck that is readily available and I think works beautifully, especially during this time of the year. So there you go. That is all of the decks that I worked with throughout the month of October. For me, like I said, I wasn't well, so I haven't done a ton of other things. In fact, I'm still trying to get caught up from being down and sick, but I did really enjoy the decks that I've been working with. Several of them will be staying out for me to continue my work with, specifically the Barbara Walker Tarot and the Witch's Oracle. The Seasons of the Witch Samhain Oracle lives in my Dark Moon decks, so that one is one that I still do use every single month. And the Madame Lydias and the Zombies will probably go back away along with the Le Vampires in order to save for the next October. And like I said, the Darkwood Tarot, as much as I enjoyed my work with it, the kids have already tried to claim it, so I will probably just go ahead and pass it along and let them have some fun with it, because again, I think it's a deck that for me really looks like them, right? It really speaks to their vibe, their energy, more so than it does for me. And let's face it, I have plenty of decks to work with. So I think it was a wonderful month of decks to work with. I had a lot of fun doing the Lifting the Veil in my Facebook group. You'll see that represented in my tarot journal in the next video. In the meantime, if you want to check out any of these decks, you'll find links for all of them in the description box below. I hope that you had a wonderful October, and I wish you many blessings moving into November. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I look forward to seeing you again soon for more creative tarot for an inspired life.